Chapter 24. Tumbling Down. Already dead? Glycer snapped. It doesn't sound like it.
I did not learn what really happened until much later, Raksha said. I told you it was confusing.
So when did you figure it out? Glycer said.
2 years after the treaty was signed. The day Taj Na fell, Raksha said.
Now they were getting somewhere. Brenna refused to talk about that, the elf girl said. But what does that have to do with Lyese?
She had become attached to Yaksha, Raksha said. Or so I thought. I had little time to give her, and thought she was doing all she could to fit in. Lyese asked to join the forces on the ground, and I could not deny her the right of combat. She'd already spent a year helping me coordinate with the goblins as an ambassador, which had kept her clear from the fighting for the most part. I hoped it would have been what you wanted. I still harbored hope that you lived, though no one had heard from you in so long. Brenna had not given up hope, and spent much time trying to figure out a way into Lumengrid. She thought there might be knowledge that could free you.
There was, Glycer said.
Once Lyese took the field, it only took a few weeks for Yaksha to promote her, Raksha said. She proved to be an amazing fighter. Yaksha and Lyese soon became inseparable off the field as well. I encouraged this, again in what I thought were your sister's best interests. I could not watch over her all the time. The responsibility of the card did not allow it.
Makes sense, Glycer said. You gave her the best protector you could. Your own blood.
Yes, and I had to focus on the ultimate defense of Taj Na. Yes, but my inattention ultimately led to the loss of the home din, Raksha said. The war had been raging relentlessly. Yaksha, perhaps under the influence of the false Lyese, perhaps through his own bullheadedness, made a grave tactical error that cost us the last outpost den in the void. I ordered him to pull all of our forces back home. He initially resisted, and cost us more men. When he finally called the retreat, the Nim followed hot on his heels, and closed in on all sides.
What about the Krark? Glycer asked.
The Krark were under siege themselves. They spared us what fighters they could, Raksha said. Dwugget and I assigned them to protect the supply lines running between Taj Na and Krakholm. As it turned out, that's the only reason the Leonin survived at all.
The mana bomb? Glycer said. There was really a mana bomb, right?
Yes, though I certainly did not set it. There is no honor in such a death. Despite the impostor's convoluted explanations, Yaksha refused to hear my words. Taj Na could have easily resisted a siege under the plan we'd formulated, Raksha said, but not the enemy within.
The car held a long-range spotting scope to one eye and looked out over the roiling mass of Nim. Even with the magically augmented lens, Raksha could not see where the Nim ended and the horizon began. Silver aerophans circled in formation, almost too distant to make out against the golden sun. The constructs looked like scavengers waiting for carrion. The levelers had not been seen, and the scouts he'd sent to track them had not returned. With a frustrated growl, he closed up the telescoping eyesight and hooked it onto his belt. Raksha didn't need the scope to see that the Nim would breach the wall soon. It was inevitable. The sheer volume of Nim corpses was forming a natural ramp, and each one that died brought the grisly mound of stinking corpses and chittering vanguard attackers that much closer to the top. Raksha heard a reptilian screech and tossed a wave at a sky hunter that flashed by. The sky hunters were always in the air now, beating back the attempts of the clumsy flying Nim. The slow-moving undead were no match for the Terran riders in a dogfight. However, the tactic was successfully keeping the Leonid flyers tied up. Had they been able to spare sky hunters to attack the Nim on the ground? If only. They could not. So that was a futile train of thought. Raksha crouched and leaped from the lookout tower to the worn path atop the wall, and landed silently next to his cousin. The top of the wall was a flurry of Leonin warriors and a few goblin soldiers scrambling to ready the siege defences.
"What did you see, my car?" Raksha asked. "How long before they're over the wall?"
"At the rate they're piling up, we have no more than a few hours," Raksha sighed.
"We had to see it for ourselves. The scouts are right. There really is no end to them." "What of the construct armies?" Yaksha asked. "Why have we not seen them?"
"Aerofin's circle on the horizon," Raksha replied. "The levelers—" Raksha was cut short by the crash of thunder that shook the wall beneath his feet. He grabbed the edge to steady himself and caught Yaksha's arm before his cousin tumbled onto the nim below. The two of them pulled themselves over the lip of the wall to see where the explosion had come from. Thick black smoke stung his disbelieving eyes. 3 gargantuan silver-legged constructs had emerged from beneath the infinite carpet of Nim that covered the glimmer void all around them. Each construct's central body consisted of a huge, globular power source that glowed an eerie blue through the haze. Their heads were massive cylinders, one of which was belching a misty blue fog. Yaksha gasped, military formality lost in shock.
"What in the name of Dekkan are those?"
"Something new," Raksha snarled.
"It appears that only one has fired. We must expect another volley."
"My car, you should let me take command of the defences and get to the throne room."
"Do not be ridiculous, Yaksha," Raksha said. "You've been listening to that elf girl too much. Our place is here, with you. If we are to die, we shall do it as the car, and our enemies shall regret the day they—"
Another cannon construct fired at that moment, sending a house-sized ball of blazing blue energy into the wall below them. Before Raksha could react, a whole section of Tajna crumbled beneath his feet and gave way.
"My car!"
Yaksha bellowed. Raksha plummeted into a pit that had just opened beneath him. The car barely heard his cousin. He dropped through floor after floor as an entire section of Tajna gave way. But fortunately, he collided with several outcroppings on his way down that slowed his fall. Raksha landed with a crack of broken armor on rough metal floor, and after a few seconds managed to scramble to cover beneath a stable block of rubble that had once formed part of a lookout tower upon which he recently stood. The cave-in continued for almost a minute, forcing Raksha to cover his ears as several tons of metal crashed down all around him. Only the overhanging block he'd chosen as cover kept the Leonin from being crushed as the rain of debris poured in. Raksha wiped iron dust from his eyes and took stock. He'd fallen all the way to a basement sublevel, which until recently had served as the royal armory, but had been converted to temporary barracks only a week before. The main wall still stood, down here at least, and he could see the sky far above. Light streamed into the dusty air above through 2 large holes that had been blasted for its side, but otherwise the main exterior wall had held almost all the way to the top. The interior of Tajna was less well protected, and too many supports had been destroyed to hold up the weight where Raksha had been standing. He was extremely lucky. Damnably lucky, for he feared he was about to see the end of his people. If Tajna fell, where else could they go? Krakholm? Raksha crawled out from his refuge and searched vainly for some path through the wreckage, a way to get out of this hole. As the haze cleared, the outlines of over a dozen Leonin bodies littered the ground all around him, and he offered a bitter prayer for the dead. From the corner of his eye, the Leonin spotted movement in the rubble. "Raksha!" Lyese called. "My leg's pinned. Can you help me?"
"Don't move," he shouted. "We're on our way."
Maybe he hadn't been able to save Glyssa from Memnarch. Maybe this really was the end for Tajna. But as long as he lived, so would Glyssa's sister. He owed his lost friend that much. With as much caution as Raksha could spare, he navigated the maze of debris and death to the elf girl's side. Liese's leg was stuck beneath a rectangular chunk of inner wall and tangled in a mess of support cables. The elf girl sat upright, her back pressed up against a round hunk of debris that looked like something that might have been left over from the old armory. Her face bore a few minor cuts, but Lyese appeared more or less unharmed. Raksha dropped to one knee to get a closer look at her leg.
It does not appear broken. Are you bleeding? Raksha asked.
I don't think so, the elf girl gasped. I think it's... Ow! I think it's just stuck. If you could pull on it gently, I think I might be able to wiggle free.
Of course, Raksha said.
He dropped onto his belly, draping himself uncomfortably across the elf girl's body, and reached in to take hold of Liese's leg.
Let us know when you are ready, and we will pull together.
Ready, Lyese said, and brought the knee of her free leg up into Raksha's belly. He gasped as the air left his lungs and his ribs cracked. The Leonin brought himself up onto all fours with agonizing effort and fought back his gorge.
What in the name of...
Raksha coughed. Lyese easily slipped her leg free of the cabling and leaped to her feet. She followed with a sharp-toed boot to Raksha's gut. He spat up silvery red blood and flopped onto his side, clutching his belly, and was unable to avoid yet another kick that caught him behind the ear. The sky above spun lazily, and the Leonin fought the urge to pass out. Raksha, 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 Lyese said, driving a boot into his side with each repetition. You're not supposed to be here. You were supposed to die up there with Yaksha. You really should have done that.
What are you talking about? What are you doing?
My job, Your Carnus, Lyese replied. Keeping one eye on the Leonin, she backed over to the metal ball she'd been leaning against when she was trapped, and crouched over the strange object, which Raksha could now see bore ancient carvings that looked Vidalcan. 2 blue crystals mounted on top of the artifact began to glow, and a low hum struck the Leonin's sensitive ears. Sorry that you had to find me, the elf added. You're not going to be as easy to cow as that fool Dwugget, or as easy to seduce as your idiot cousin. And you know what that means, my car? I get to kill you personally.
Yes, why? Raksha whispered. Glyssa would...
Lyese laughed. A cold, tinny sound, unlike anything Raksha had ever heard. When next she spoke, her voice changed. The tones of the young elf girl he knew were underlaid with a low, masculine baritone that filled the air all around the Leonin's head.
Who are you?
Raksha whispered. Ah, you figured it out, the Lyese thing sneered, and gave him another kick. You should have gone along with the Volshok cat man. Still have your elf girl and your precious palace. Would still be in one piece. Of course, you would still be dead. But what is the life of a car compared to one of her subjects? The false Lyese tapped out a pattern on the glowing artifact and stood, apparently satisfied.
Release the girl, Raksha coughed, or I will kill whoever you look like.
Idiot Leonin, the girl is right here. She's terrified, let me tell you. I'm going to enjoy consuming her mind when I move on.
Move on? Raksha asked.
Tell me, did I squeeze you too hard, my car? The elf said as she brought her fists together. You can't imagine how tricky it is to use only enough strength when you're an ogre.
Ogre?
Raksha managed. He was already recovering, but tried to hide it. If Lyese got close enough, he might be able to surprise her. Gave you too much credit, I see, Lyese said. I'll make it easier for you. Here's a riddle. What do a Volshok priest, an ogre, and an elf girl have in common?
Sounds like a bad goblin joke.
You are the opposite of fun, Lyese said. Vectro at your service. The elf strolled around the glowing artifact, which now hummed louder than before. When she reached the Leonin, she took a deep bow with an exaggerated flourish.
Aldrock Vectro, Raksha said. Aldrock Vectro is dead.
Just Vectro, if you please, the thing that wore Liese's body said. Vectro brought the elf girl's visage mere inches from Raksha and added, "The human Alderok is nothing but a smear on the path now." Raksha brought a gauntleted fist crashing into the imposter's borrowed face, knocking Vectro backwards. The car rolled forward onto his feet and spun into a crouch, faced the imposter and roared,
"I am Raksha Golden Cup, Car of Taj Na. I have no need of your services."
The imposter screamed and charged the Leonin car. Raksha had lost his sword, but no Leonin was ever defenseless as long as he had his claws. He blocked Vectro's first punch with his palm and drove a fist into the imposter's gut. Vectro doubled over with a cough, and the Leonin followed through with a knee to the face that knocked the imposter backwards, stunned.
"Whatever you are, Vectro, it's good to see that you can take a beating no matter what you look like," Raksha snarled. "Now get out of that body before we rip its head off. We really don't want to do that."
"No deal, Car," the imposter coughed. "I've been waiting for a very long time for a body all of my own, and now that I've got it, I'm not leaving. The master says this one is mine to keep, and I intend to." Raksha launched himself into a forward roll and tackled Vectra around the legs, bringing the ersatz elf to the hard metal floor of the old armory with a crash. He followed with a fist to the jaw and pinned Vectro's head back with one elbow as he threw himself across the elf girl's stolen body.
"That device," Raksha said.
He nodded to the glowing ball of humming silver.
"Is it a weapon?"
Vectro smiled and looked pointedly over Raksha's shoulder. All traces of the strange Vectro voice gone. Lyese screamed. "Yaksha, he's gone mad! That artifact is going to destroy Taj Na! We've got to get out!" Raksha didn't see Yaksha's blow coming until it was too late. He was thrown back and struck his head hard enough to make the world spin. Yaksha crouched over him and placed a hand against Raksha's forehead, then muttered a standard spell used by the Leonin on those rare occasions it paid to take live prisoners in war. Raksha's muscles went slack, and without ceremony, Yaksha slung the car over his shoulder. Raksha would be paralyzed below the neck for hours.
"What is that?" Yaksha said, jabbing a claw at the whining silver globe.
"It's a mana bomb, and it's going to go off any minute. Yaksha, he's betrayed us all. We have to leave him, or we won't have time to save the rest of your people," Lyese said. She leaned in closer and whispered loud enough for Raksha to hear. "Our people."
"Most have already evacuated. I gave the order after the last blast," Yaksha said.
"But," Raksha mumbled deliriously. Lyese was already heading towards the cable ladder Yaksha had used to get down to the basement level. Within seconds, the elf girl, and the being that controlled her, scrambled up the ladder and away from the glowing, whining bomb.
"Damn!" Yaksha growled and followed. "Raksha, I will see you dead for this, but not today."
He followed Lyese up the ladder, and within minutes Yaksha and the elf girl were well clear of Taj Na. Yaksha dropped Raksha to the ground without ceremony and propped the paralyzed Leonin against a pile of Leonin bodies that reeked of blood and rot.
"Yaksha," the car croaked. "She is not."
Before Raksha could finish, Taj Na disappeared in a blinding flash of blue and white. A half-second later, the deafening thunder of the mana bomb explosion reached his ears and blasted the world into silence. Unable even to shield his eyes, Raksha was forced to watch as his home, his kingdom, and the future of his people were laid low under a rapidly expanding cloud of destruction. "You saw it go up?" Lyese said. Something tickled her cheek, and her hand came away covered with tears she hadn't noticed until now.
"I couldn't look away, though my soul very nearly died that day," Raksha said.
"I think I can figure out what happened next from what they told me," Lyese interrupted. "Vectra accused you, and all Yaksha could see was you trying to kill the woman he loved. It sounds like she would have killed everyone if you hadn't stopped her.
It was Yakshar's evacuation order that saved everyone, Raksha said. My discovery only saved the imposter.
But what was Vectro? How can I get Lyese back? Glissa's eyes flashed with fury. You told me she was dead, but this is worse, a lot worse. She's still in there, Raksha. I know it.
It does not matter, Raksha said with a sigh.
The Leonin placed a firm paw on her shoulder.
He will not leave her until she is mortally wounded. We would have to kill her to save her.
I can't accept that, Glissa said. We have to figure out what he is and how to get him out. I want my sister back, Raksha.
Glissa, she's dead. She has to be, Raksha replied.
She stood to look the Leonin eye to eye and jabbed a finger into his chest. Why? Glissa demanded.
Because we have a chance to stop what's coming now, Raksha said. If you choose to confront Vectro, you will fail to strike Memnarch when the time comes. That is why she must be dead. If there is a way to force Vectro out, we will do it. But you cannot concern yourself with her now. It's one life that might not even exist.
Glissa knew the Leonin was right. There was nothing she could do but fail if she tried to save Lyese now. All right, damn you, she said. I'll set her aside. But why even carry on this war? Lyese Vectro is a monarch. It doesn't make any sense. She could have simply ended the conflict and let the Nim in years ago. Why the bomb?
The war serves Memnarch's ends. I do think I was meant to die in the bomb blast, but luck conspired to let me find it and Lyese, and Vectro's treachery before it was too late. Vectro only accused me as a last resort. I owe my life to Yakshar, despite what has come since. With Tajnar destroyed, the Nim and Leveler armies could have moved in on Krakholm, and maybe that was the original plan. He stopped pacing and placed a hand on Glissa's shoulder. How did you learn all of this hiding out in the tangle? Glissa asked, still unconvinced. Do you remember the name Gonfas? Raksha asked.
Who? Glissa said.
She was a Silvok, one of Vectro's vessels, Raksha said. She knew you.
I don't know any... Wait, Glissa said. There was a Silvok judge at my trial in Viridia.
That was Vectro, inhabiting Gonfas. The impostor was, at the time, trying to ensure the Viridians didn't execute you, which would have spoiled Memnarch's plans. When you escaped, Vectro was forced to leave the Silvok.
And showed up on the mountain with a pack of goblins, Glissa said. Raksha nodded.
A few months after I'd entered the Tangle, I encountered Gonfas while tracking a Vorak. The human had been wounded by a pack of Carbadogs, but she recognized me. She remembered everything Vectro knew, including the length of Memnarch's hibernation, the Mirror Core, and the part you were bound to play. And you confirmed everything she told me. That cannot be a coincidence.
What made you believe her? Glissa asked. A dying human wandering in the woods?
She knew things about you. The story you told at the trial did not fall on deaf ears.
He flicked his ears in Leonin embarrassment.
And perhaps I believed her, because my heart wanted it to be true. It gave me hope.
Well, it's a start, Glissa said.